So I'm going to take you through a short presentation, but I want to really open up for questions because I want to help whatever you are planning to do next. Whether it's on your career, whatever you may be doing, whether it's starting a company, I want to help answer questions and get as relevant as possible. So, and I'm here literally with only one intention, which is I want to help as much as possible here. So, let me take you through, as you got a tour of the office, this really simple but important notion of why culture is going to be your most important strategy. Whether you are going to be a leader in a company, big or small, whether you start a company, culture is going to be your top strategy. And this is a picture of the leadership team at NextJump. The leadership team is voted in once a year. It's called MV21. It stands for Martha's Vineyard 21, where we have an investor who gives us a $40 million beach property to use one week per year, and it sleeps 21 people. So just by sleeping capacity, that's the voted leadership. And it's a phenomenal group of which when we compete on the offsite, we split the group into a team of 11 against 10, and that division in terms of seniority came at 5+ years. So the veteran team had been at NextJump, 11 people over 5 years. The newbies were less than 5, which, if you think about it, in the tech space, in any business today, leadership teams are not that tenured. Loyalty doesn't exist at that level. But in the tech space, that's incredibly rare. Usually when you split, it's like, less than 1 year, more than 1 year, but we're talking about 5+, sort of in the middle. So let me take you through this notion of why culture is so critical. It's a human capital economy, and a lot of companies, a lot of CEOs, leaders, and even the stock markets have not adjusted from the previous economy. So if you think back to the agricultural economy, the number one asset in that time was land. Whoever had more land was going to win. More land, best land. Then came the manufacturing economy. And I don't know if you know the origins of this, but this is a picture of what factories look like. Colleges originally were built to feed people into factories, which is why desks in colleges still tend to look like this. And it was just built around the notion that the machines were the most important asset. Number one asset is the machinery, and people are, dispensable. If someone doesn't work out, remove them, and you need to act, properly to run the machine. Well, times have changed a lot, and it's a human capital economy. And if you think about what happened in manufacturing, you measured metrics on productivity of the machines. And yet today, you look at any company in the public markets, private markets, what are you measuring? In the tech space, it's click-throughs, page views. It's basically all machine-oriented, product-oriented metrics. But given that it's a human capital economy, every CEO, every leader will say that my assets walk in and out of the door every single day. And my most important assets are people. Who's measuring metrics like, the quality of life in people? Are you growing and learning? Are you feeling fulfilled? Do you feel happier? Are you getting healthier? Are you getting more energy? Are you more engaged? No one's measuring metrics on people. And yet, every leader will say, this is all about, it's human capital today. Human capital is a differentiator. You guys are the differentiator. So, just really quick, you should have seen this as you walk through the office, what we stand for. It's a very simple phrase that said to do little things, lots of little things, so that others can do the great things they're meant to do. And this is what we call our why we exist. And we built a simpler way to understand this called Better Me plus Better You. When you add these together, you get Better Us. And Better Us isn't us as a NextJump, the company, but Better Us being you make a better world. When Better Me is all about growing, because the only way something is little is if you're growing a lot. If you have a lot of money, giving money away is little to you. If you have a lot of knowledge, giving away knowledge is little. Versus if you have nothing, you have scarcity, you can't give anything away. Better You is helping others. And we built this little formula of Better Me plus You equals Us. So this will make more sense as I go through this, but you should have seen this theme of Better Me, Better You resonate through our office as you walk through it. So looking at culture and everything in culture that starts with culture, tied to human capital, really falls in 3 buckets. It's the hiring, the environment, and the firing of a company. So the reason why it's a funnel is that you recruit as many people as possible, and then there's a security, which is going to be that you don't hire anybody. You don't hire everybody. You're going to screen, you're going to hire very carefully, because when you hire correctly, your chances of success in any business exponentially is higher. Then you focus on building the right environment. And when you build the right environment, doing right is easier, and actually it's harder to do wrong. In our office, you'll see it's harder to be unhealthy. It's harder to eat poorly. It's harder to not exercise when you come into our environment, because that's how we design the environment. And then firing is something that nobody wants to do. If you plan to start a company, you don't plan to fire people that you have hired, but you'll see that nobody hires perfectly. And you will end up doing firings. And these three things added together end up creating and defining your culture. So I'm going to walk you through our story really quick. I started the company in 1994, coming out of college. And it was not because I wanted to get rich. I had a high school sweetheart being on financial aid, and I couldn't pay for my phone bills. And so I started a company literally to just stay with my high school sweetheart. We started in print guidebooks by 97. We went online, mainly because we couldn't afford the cost of printing. And then by 2002, we had grown up to 150 employees. And we shrunk down in the dot-com bust, January 2002, to 4 people. It was me, it's myself, Megan, my chief of staff, 2 other people, 4 people, and it was the worst of the worst. 60 days of bloody noses, eviction notices, and the worst that I would not want to really put on my worst enemy, yet the best lessons learned from nearly going out of business. So I'll walk you through key things that occurred since then. So in 2006, up to that point, 75% of the company was made of sales and marketing people. We made a decision in 2006 to flip the human capital in the company to 75% engineers. And when we did research and talked to experts, the one thing we heard was this: there's a shortage of engineers in the country, if not the world, and if you want to recruit quality engineers, you have to go to college campuses. And it will take 4 to 5 years to make any traction, so don't bother, move to Silicon Valley. Now, we love taking a contrarian view to a lot of things in life, so we said, if it's gonna take that long, we better start quick, and we're gonna stay in New York. So we headquartered in New York, and we went and we started to look at, since this is so competitive, what are the top schools for engineering talent? And 3 of the top schools were actually on the West Coast, 2 are in the Midwest, 5 are actually on the East Coast. And the 4 top ones on the East Coast was Carnegie Mellon, Cornell, Georgia Tech, and MIT. And to be very frank, Cornell was a sleeper that we didn't recognize till we started hiring, and then we saw the caliber of talent. And Cornell soon enough became one of our top choices to recruit for engineers. And we invested heavily starting in 2006, and it did take 4 years. Not until 2010 did we get the top choice of candidates, where candidates were applying in droves. I'll give you just one quick data point. I think last year we had 5,000 engineers apply for jobs at Nextron. We're a tiny company. It's a lot of engineers applying. Every engineer we made a job offer to had 14 job offers on average. So you're talking with the who's who. We had a 92% acceptance rate. So they're taking jobs with Nextron over any other company out there, and those are very big numbers. So we've done very well in engineering, but you know what happened? In 2008, as we hired, we realized we made a big error in hiring. We hired for the brightest, most driven people, and we lacked one ingredient, which is humility. And without humility, incredibly confident, driven people without humility tend to, by definition, be arrogant. If you ever work in a team or a company of arrogant people, it's extremely painful. So of course, we went through and we fired 2/3 of the engineering staff that we had spent so much time hiring, and felt it was going to be better for the culture in the long run to make this call. But we did firing all wrong. And I'll walk you through some of the worst things we've done. And it led to tremendous pain, and then basically the negative underground word of mouth from these individuals who were pissed off. These are people, top students out of all these schools, and they had never had a blemish in their life record. Getting fired from Nextron was the first one. And we were not good at it either. We fired poorly, and they went on a warpath to try to tear the company down. Every public possible comment on blog was just talking about how bad this company was. Then, as we hit 2009, came out of stealth mode, and had press releases on the company, New York Times wrote an article, people started realizing, especially recruiters, a far more effective way to recruit talent was to just poach it from Nextron. Spend less than 12 months here, most engineers were getting offered salary increases of 2 to 3 times what we gave them. Huge increases just for a little time, and we just couldn't keep up. Before you know it, turnover skyrocketed to 40%. And in the tech space, this is actually not talked about a lot, but that's very average. In Silicon Valley, I heard it's much higher on average too. I mean, this is like, it's crazy. If you ever want to run a company where turnover is that high, near impossible. Because all the knowledge is constantly churning. So firing led to eventually huge turnover, and I'll show you how the two are related. But then by 2011, and end of the year, we had the help of two experts, a guy named Jim Lear, I'll tell you more about him in a sec, as well as Simon Sinek, and we came up with this little phrase, better me plus you equals us. And we started investing and building the environment stronger and stronger. And by 2012, within weeks, turnover went from 40% down to 0. And then as turnover went down, and the company started running and accelerating, our revenue growth started picking up. Where for having been around for 19 years, the last 5 years, our revenue has been growing on average 25% year over year. This past year, it jumped to 60% and it's still accelerating. So once the human capital side fixed, the revenue caught up directly afterwards. And then what we're working on now, furthering the environment, and this is more help with Jim Lear, but we're looking at how do we grow even faster than 60%. How do we take it to a whole different level? And it really boils down to a very simple thing. If we can help our senior people, our leadership, stop making the same mistakes. There's a guy I met named Josh Waitzkin, world chess player, #1 in the world, became a martial artist, and he said that in the world of chess, if you could prevent making the same mistake twice, like prevent human beings repeating the same mistakes, within 5 years, everyone could become a world chess champion. Meaning, that's how hard it is to not make the same mistake. And these mistakes, most people think are going to be technical in nature. So everyone tries to improve their coding skills, improve their presentation skills. Yet most mistakes in our lives are psychological slips. And so I'll walk you through what I mean by character imbalance. So taking you through this for hiring, we found over the years there are two types of hiring. There's college recruiting, which really represents hiring in bulk. If you want a lot of people applying at once through a whole funnel, you're going to hire anywhere from 20 to even 50 people at once. You're going to take a different process than hiring laterally. Laterally being just one-off hires here and there. If you're creating a startup, you're going to do a lot of lateral hiring, a lot less college recruiting or bulk recruiting till much later stage. So the hiring of our engineers, I mean, very strong stats in terms of the quality of engineers and where they came from in NextJobs. Our process is pretty intense. It's what we call a 10-hour date. It's a 10-hour interview schedule starting at 10 a.m. going all the way up to 7 o'clock at night, and we present as much as we end up interviewing skills tests. And for every one candidate going through Super Saturday, we have 2 next jumpers working all day. And roughly 50 candidates will go through a full day, starting at 1,000 people pre-screened and interviewed down to the final 50. And we have 100 next jumpers working that day to help screen. And we finish Super Saturday usually 8 or 9 o'clock at night. By Monday, we make job offers. So very fast turnaround, tremendous data coming out, but this is something that's going to be relevant at a later stage for most of you if you want to start your own company. So lateral recruiting, right, or lateral hiring is going to be where it's more important. So the biggest mistake learned in the hiring process was this. Lean equals success, fat equals failure. Now, you could argue that physically as well, but this is definitely for hiring. It's amazing when you look at startups with literally no resources, no capital, without even offices at times. They do the most amazing things. The most amazing things are accomplished. Then they raise money, they end up hiring like crazy, get senior accomplished people coming in, and have offices, nice chairs and everything, and the whole company fails. And this pattern is so common that with scarcity, people innovate and succeed, but with abundance, you see repeated failures in public companies and in private companies. Big lesson we learned. You'll see that as you hire, more is not better. So when we looked at how to hire correctly, we really found the best way to hire is to hire like you're dating someone. Think about dating and going into marriage. You're going to adopt them into your family when you marry them. And one of the most common mistakes that occurs in interviewing is a lot of people put a candidate through 6, 10 first dates. Meaning if I wanted to hire you, what I would say is, you know what, I'd like all of us here to interview you individually. And if you are a good pickup artist and you know how to master that first date, you will win us all over with the exact same pitch. And then people say, let's gather together. If we all like them, thumbs up, thumbs down. If we all like this first date, we make an offer. It's not the way to hire. Treat it like a date where you go on date 1. If you get along, same person interviewing should have date 2. If you get along, then you go to date 3. And what we found was date 1 are like vitals, just basic conversation. It's a lot of like lovey-dovey, great chemistry occurring. But by date 2, we meet and we say, okay, let's get down to brass tacks. What are your concerns and issues? We'll talk about ours too. It's like our first mini fight. But then we spend 2-3 weeks and we meet again, if we still got along. To see after you reflect on that date, do you still get along? And this dating process is no different than marriage. If you go on one date with someone you propose the next day, it's too soon. If you wait 7 years, it's probably too late. Somewhere in between first date and 7 years, now in hiring you're gonna do a lot faster obviously in 7 years, you're gonna know. You're gonna know when it's right. And a lot of people will say, well, what are the things after the interview thing, right? What questions should I ask? What psychological tests? What people go off in all different types of criteria at hire correctly. And the number one most important thing is this: can you trust the person? And simple trust test is this: will you buy a used car from the person? If you pass that test, how about this? If something happened to me, would this person take care of my family? Can you trust this person with your family, with your kids, if something happened to you? And people want to know, so what test helps you determine trust? Is there a mobile app that will help you figure out how to trust another human being? So there's one tool, one app that actually can measure trust better than any other application or tool out there. And it's you. A human being can judge if someone is trustworthy or not. But it just takes some time before date 2, date 3, date 4, before you know a person's trustworthy or not. So trust yourself and go on dates with some time apart, and you'll know how to hire correctly. And one hire is going to be a lot better than 5 bad hires. One good hire. So on firing. Now in firing, we made a lot of mistakes. I'll read you some of the worst things that happened for us and explain to you how we got here. And these are scathing criticisms on NextJump. So I have a list of the top 10 worst criticisms of NextJump on Glassdoor. It's one of many sites that have, you can go in and anonymously comment. Now, if you ever read criticisms on companies, it's like bad, but nothing that looks like this. Nothing. These people had to have been pissed off. And we found later that people we fired were so pissed, they went and created 12 to 18 fake accounts to just act like different people and just wrote stuff like this. Worst place to work should be called Next Live. Wouldn't wish this place is my worst enemy. If you want to grow and learn, go elsewhere. Toxic, toxic environment. Save yourself, do not be the next to jump. Extremely long hours. The reason NextJump was trainer and food on premises is because they don't expect you to go home. Everything we did got criticized, no matter what. Now, turnover didn't actually skyrocket here yet, because this started coming up way before we came out of stealth mode. But what we learned was this, and this is one of the biggest mistakes in firing. Your ex-employee is your number one advertisement of the company. And the reason is this: an existing employee is biased. An existing employee in a company is saying it's so great, I'd expect you to say that. Anyone else who read about the company, well, you don't really know. You haven't been in the company. But a person who's been in there, whether they were fired, whether they left on their own, is the single strongest advertisement of your company out in the marketplace. And what we learned the hard way, when I say we, I probably learned more than anybody else in the hard way, is this: how you fire someone, no different than how you hire someone, is a representation of how you treat people. Think of it as like marriage or even dating. How you date someone or get married is as much of how you break up with someone, a representation of how you treat people. This is a lesson we learned the very hard way. Now, one of the biggest insights that we learned of the worst mistake, but also was this: timing was critical. When an individual started at NextJump and worked within 3 months, but they did not work out, and if they left, the organization barely felt it, because nobody really knew them that well. The work they were doing didn't really, spider its way into the company. But when they were here, between 3 to 6 months or longer, When they left, things got really bad. They took teams of people with them. I don't mean recruiting, but like people get friendly. People get to know each other. So any decision that tends to occur if someone doesn't work out, after 3 months, and especially after 6 months, there's significant pain that you will feel in the company. And this is very hard to do because a lot of us may feel something wrong, but you can't pull the trigger to say this isn't working out. So big mistakes and lessons learned here. Going to the environment. So I'm going a little bit backwards in terms of, I did hiring and firing because they kind of go together, looking at the environment. So 2 influencers who helped us the most in this. Jim Lear and Simon Sinek. And if these are individuals you've never heard of, Simon's done a TED Talk, which is amazing, and Jim Lear's written like 16 books. But the first book he got really well known for was The Power of Full Engagement. And Jim is an interesting guy. He's arguably the top psychiatrist or top coach, I would say, arguably in the world. And he has the who's who of every field, elite, going through his system. World-class tennis, golf, NFL, NBA, Olympic athletes, top CEOs, FBI, SWAT team, anybody elite. And the reason they go to him is one thing. These are the best in the world, in no matter what field. And they got stuck. They couldn't get beyond a certain ceiling they reached in their life. And they go to Jim, and Jim unlocks this next level of growth. And what we learned from Jim was this. A lot of people feel they're in a fixed mindset. I am who I am, and I can't get more than bronze. I can't do better than this. But what Jim helps teach people is that you can go into a growth mindset, which all of us should be. That people can endlessly upgrade themselves, but it takes tremendous, deliberate practice. So we learned from Jim the need to go into a growth mindset as all human beings. Then we learned something else from Simon. Now Simon has done a TED Talk in 2010. I think it's an all-time number 4 right now on a trend to become number 1 very soon. This thing has been on a tear. It's gone so viral. He's the author of a bestseller book. He's booked 2 years out for speaking engagements, charges an ungodly sum, and I think Facebook ranked him as the single most viral guy they've ever met. This guy is out there, very influential. And he spent a lot of time studying what he calls the golden circle, and what you do is an outside, how the center is why you do anything. Anything. Why do you go to work? Why do you do anything? And the number 1 thing he found was this. Human beings exist to service other human beings. That's the universal why. That's the purpose of what we were put on this planet for. Now, the way you learn this is interesting too. He spent a lot of time with people in EMS, firefighters, policemen, teachers. People who have miserable pay, poor work conditions, yet fulfilled in life. Rhett is now one of the teachers, so fulfilled in life, right? Went from Google to now teaching, thrilled, right? And the one common thread he found was when you service other human beings, help others, there's nothing more fulfilling in life than that. And a lot of us go this path of saying, you know what? I'm going to earn money. I'm going to keep working and earning money. And once I'm flush with cash, I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing charity, helping others. What happens over time, your definition of flush changes. Flush is from $1 million to now you're rat racing against someone else who's succeeding, 10 million. Before you know it, you're so selfish and growing that you forget even how to help people. And you never do. You never really do. And you start to protect your assets as opposed to being able to give and help others. So the combination of Jim and Simon is what helped us get to better me plus you equals us. And what we found was this is not a next jump only formula. This is a universal formula for how all companies should run. Every investment made in companies, in culture, should be either in better me, so helping people grow, or better you, which is helping others. And when you do this right, you can unlock some pretty impressive things. So when we did all this, some awesome things happened. And it happened really fast. First, we attracted and retained the right people. Higher quality candidates kept applying in larger numbers, and we were able to retain them no matter how much they were offered. Our turnover literally shot from 40% down to 0. 0% in the tech space. There's no company out there in tech who can actually claim 0% turnover in the size even that we've got to. There's no company. And 0% and our engineers are higher quality. They're getting offered double and triple their salaries, and they're not even taking a meeting. And then employees who said they love their job. So love, not like. Think about asking someone, do you love your job? Most people will hesitate and they'll say, no, I like my job. Well, do you love your job? Love is reserved for very few things. And job and love are two words that tend not to go together. When we asked employees over a year ago, do you love your job? 20% said yes. Today, over 90% say they love their job. And then what followed after that was revenue. 5 years growing 25% year over year. That's a lot of data of consistent growth. And in tech, 5 years is like an eternity. And suddenly it shoots up to 60% year over year, and it's still accelerating. Two things that help really do this. We declared our intentions, meaning we declared how we spend our capital, our money, to build culture in better me and better you. And it's important. It's like a game of pool. If I said, 8-ball corner pocket and I shoot it and I get it in, I win the game. But if I don't say anything and I shoot pool and the ball goes in the corner pocket and I say, I meant to do that, you lose the game actually. You have to call. But if I call a shot and don't get it in, you don't win the game either. It's important to declare your intents. But then it's equally important on the action part, the evidence, to document and share it. And the one big lesson we learned was this: the walls of an office are typically covered with art or policies. It should be covered with pictures and evidence and proof of how you are following through on whatever you declared. Better me plus you equals us. Every investment we make is making people better, growing, for the purpose of helping others. And every example on the walls represent that. Once we declare the intent, so when we said, we're going to do laundry for people, you bring laundry, we'll do it. In the past, people would have said, you know what? It's because they want you to stay at work longer. We built the gym. It's because they don't want you to go home. But once we declared our intent, everyone's like, oh, I get it. And at first, people were like, I'm skeptical. But as they saw more and more proof on the walls, and we're consistent, suddenly what we say, what we do, when those match up, it's what they call being authentic. We hit a tipping point. And literally, in a matter of weeks, turnover shot down. A couple months went by, and as the company started doing better, because when the people are there, the revenue followed suit afterwards. So where we're experimenting, so we're what we call learning on steroids, where we experiment like crazy on human capital, on culture. So where we're experimenting on hiring. So when we interview now, we get people to do the job before you start. During the interview process, we test, literally, if it takes 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we test if you are actually getting better during the interview process. We test if you are actually trying to help others, strangers, during the interview process. And then there's a lesson we learned from the Marines. The Marines have a saying that anyone can become a Marine, but not everyone will be a Marine. Meaning that even if you hire incorrectly, their onboarding process, their training process, their boot camp is so rigorous, they will make you into a Marine. That's how good and well the environment is designed. And people will drop out along the process. And that's why everyone will not become a Marine. So we believe that we can do this in the environment. So we're investing in hiring, but equally much in the environment. And then on the firing part, we did something very big and unusual, not because we wanted it to get press or attention, but we announced as of last fall a no firing policy. Think about this. It's like in schools and tenureship, a no firing policy, saying that if we make you a job offer, we hire you. You're hired for life. You can leave whenever you want, but we will not fire you. Unless it's for moral, ethical, or criminal, we will not fire you. And what we found was this. For human beings in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom of the pyramid was always around security. Home, shelter, food was always around security. Once people feel safe, performance skyrockets. And the other thing that occurred is whenever you meet with someone and you want to have a development conversation, how to make you better, you see employees usually back stiffen and they're thinking, are you documenting ways to fire me? Well, there's no firing policy, so it's not. And so you know what happened? Development took off. People were tougher, more vulnerable. I mean, crazy development, and everyone started growing faster. The last thing we're investing is alumni programs. We did one recently called the Boomerang, where those who left that we think were the best, and maybe started in the company at a stage when the culture wasn't even as developed or strong, we give a physical boomerang that says better me plus you equals us, and we ask them to have it on their desk wherever they're working now. It's an open-ended job offer. Whenever you want to return, consider it a job offer that's lasting forever. So testing programs constantly in both of these. The biggest test that we're doing on the environment is around leadership development. How do we make better leaders? And this, we believe, is the next big growth. We're 60% year over year. We believe, if done right, could go to 300-400% year over year growth in revenue. And Jim Lear wrote a recent book. He actually wrote about NextJump quite a bit in the book as well, endorsed the back cover of the book. But this guy's an amazing guy, and he discovered this awesome thing. Character is a muscle. When you think about your character, you think about words like confidence, humility, vulnerability. And most people say, I am what I am, right? That's in my DNA. I have a shell, and I am what I am. I'm confident, I'm humble, I'm not this, I'm patient, I'm kind, or I'm not. And you think you're set. But how about this? Could you become kinder? Could you become more confident, humbler? Could you have more grit? Of course you can. And what he discovered was character is a muscle. And like muscles, if exercised, they get stronger. And if you not exercise them, they atrophy. And this is a huge insight that led to something we're experimenting on. We found the top 2 character muscles that everyone holds. And we found muscles come in pairs. It's like having a right hand, left hand. If you play tennis, forearm and the backhand. You cannot win a game of tennis with anyone decently good playing only the forehand. You have to play both. Confidence and humility are the 2 muscles that are most important. They have to, and the strength comes in balance. If you are confident, say level 7, and your humility level 3, that imbalance, overconfident, overhumble, is what they call arrogant, by definition. If you are humility level 8, confidence, say level 2, by definition, that's insecurity. And all of us fall in one of those 2 buckets, and we are imbalanced. When you're imbalanced, you tend to stay in balance, and every decision you make at the point of stress, when it's most critical, an arrogant person makes an arrogant call, and an insecure person makes an insecure call. Every decision, every human judgment, psychologically made. It's a psychological slip. Arrogant decisions are bad decisions. Insecure decisions are bad decisions. And so balancing this is key. So we built a little worksheet that we're working on of identifying first which side you fall on, and then training the other side. The most common notion in this is playing tennis. When you play the forehand, you're very good, and people suck at the backhand, typically. And so when you see someone playing the backhand, and we wonder, why are you not hitting the backhand well? You're like, I suck at the backhand. So you know what you do? You overcompensate to your dominant side. You will shift over and try to hit it on the forehand. And you're so far away that a good player will kill you. They'll spank you. You cannot win a game not playing both sides. But if your forearm is your strength, you may still hit your winning shots with a forearm. But if you do not know how to play the backhand, you cannot win. You need to get balanced, even though you will have strength. So this is something that we're experimenting and testing. We're seeing some early and incredible signs of this. So I literally finished this presentation 30 minutes before I gave it. And part of the reason we put it together so last minute is because we're learning so much. I always think it's an injustice to give you outdated knowledge. So I'm trying to give you as much of what we know today as of May 2nd, and you could even say, 6:30. And this is our best thinking, and we call ourselves a teaching organization. And a lot of people ask us, why are you sharing all this? This is what people call IP. Intellectual property. The board calls this IP. Why are you giving this away? And first off, great teachers, you need to know it in your bones. You have to have learned it in the trenches. The Boy Scout rule number 1, you have to be the example before you can teach and help other people. Otherwise, you're an armchair professor who has never actually done anything and only talk in theoretics. There's much more to learn in people who have been in the trenches, gone through mistakes and failures. So, to help you understand why I'm even sharing this, the story of my father. So this is a picture of my father and what inspired to do little things that allow others to do the great things they're meant to do. just real quick story. I grew up in Nigeria in West Africa. My dad actually is the most famous corn scientist in the world. In the Encyclopedia Britannica, he's listed as the father of maize, which is corn. And he's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times. So 17 years, lived in West Africa, is the biggest research institute. I was the oldest of 3 kids. And financial aid all the way through boarding school. And every time I went home in the holidays, I would have to correct his papers. His scientific journals. If you ever have a father who's a scientist, these are painful 800 pages of technical writings. And it's grammatical errors. My dad has, once again, been nominated 3 times, but his papers were never easy to read. So I spent time correcting ands and buts and does. And when I was 14 years old, I distinctly remember this, December 24th, 5 a.m., I'm sitting in his office, Christmas Eve, reading through hundreds of pages, correcting little things. There was an article right there on the table. There was a scientist who wrote an article about my father. And he said, Dr. Kim is one of the most brilliant scientists the world's ever seen. Great stuff, but at the end of it he says, but he'll never succeed because he cannot present his work. My dad talks too fast, he has a stutter. Presentation is one of his greatest weaknesses. And growing up, I was a carbon copy of my dad. Terrible stutter, talk too fast. Really, I would rather do anything than speak to an audience, a group of people. That's who I was. And so, as much as I tried to help, I couldn't really help him that much. And I saw him repeatedly over decades, seeing people come up and say, I will help you write your application for the Nobel Peace Prize and help you win it, but I want half the credit for your 30 years of research, and let's win it together. His ethics were too high, he always said no. People always try to take advantage of just what was a little thing for them to do. They wanted everything back. Half the credit, and it just wasn't right. So 10 years goes by. I started Next Shop at 20. And as I was pitching to raise money, I pitched to over 1,000 investors. Raised $45 million from 100 individuals who invested. It's a crazy amount for angel investing, individuals investing. And one day I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I actually know how to present. It's a 10,000 hours rule maybe. I just practiced enough. And I realized that it was like a spiritual moment where I was like, God put me on this planet to go help my dad, not instead to go build a tech company. This guy's trying to end world hunger, starvation, through corn and research. So I tried to leave the company twice. Put in CEOs, and they were tearing apart the company. Before you know it, 9/11 hits, get down to 4 people, I can't leave. My own baby's about to die. So 10 years goes by. I'm turning 40 this year. But 6 years ago, when I was 34, I met this individual, a billionaire, who said something very profound to me. I only buy art from living artists. I only buy art from living artists because I want to put fuel behind them when they're alive, not once they die. And my dad used to always say, if I won the Nobel Peace Prize, it would be a megaphone. I would be able to amplify my work and end world hunger faster. But right in that period, when I was 34, my dad had a terrible stroke. He's still alive, but his energy and his health just shot down. His ability to do the quality and the quantity of work before just changed dramatically. And it dawned on me that, this might not be a megaphone, but more of a trophy and a mantle at this point. And at that moment, I just started seeing a lot of other people in similar situations like my dad, where they could not present. They didn't know how to raise money. They didn't know people to raise money from. All these people had little things they couldn't do. And it's little because once you know how to do it, it's little to you, but it's a great hindrance for them. And so as we started to live out why we exist, which is doing lots of little things, because as we get better and stronger, it's little to us, so that others can do the great things they're meant to do. We try to live this every day through all examples. So that's why we share everything we know here. And we'll help you whatever you need from us. Jim Lear said this recently to us, that how we built culture and how we defined it. He sees Next Jump as what he calls the demonstration project. And as we share what we're doing and teach everyone how to do this right, not for ego's sake or not for publicity, but to actually help companies run better. He believes that we'll be referenced in history as a turning point of how business is running differently today. So, thank you guys.